So welcome to you, Shawn and Becky. Over to you.
Hi, friends. It's great to be with so many friends, old and new, today, and it's been a great morning. And I preface this by saying I can relate, of course, to every single session. And for those of you that were here for Stephen early this morning, I feel like some of our backgrounds are parallel, and I want to just start a little bit with my background to clarify that this is a journey for all of us. So anything that I say or share is not in any way meant to be judgmental or punitive or in any way only reflecting on my journey with social justice and my journey with inclusiveness and my which has not been straight and easy, and particularly for the years I've been doing this. I go back to the 1970s when we were bringing songs from Africa and singing them with a very English boy choir sound, with boom chucks. So I've been part of all of that. And so I had this very traditional training. The stories, I remember now hearing a very racist comment in music theater or music theory as a freshman. I had no idea it was racist, because the instructor said to the one Black student in the class, "You come sing the blues. You should know how to do it." He was saying the blues scale, but with his accent. And so we all have these stories. We all have these background that we carry with us. I was raised northwestern Pennsylvania, very rurally, one Jewish family in the school, everybody nearly white, Christian. And in my own elementary school experience, our music teacher got up in front of the audience. I remember this very vividly and said, "We're going to sing a song about Hanukkah. This is how young Jewish boys and girls celebrate Christmas." Now, even then, I knew something was terribly wrong with that statement, at 6 or 7. We've come a long way, and this is just to corroborate Angie's statement with this. This session is going to sort of come at this from the elementary middle school viewpoint, which is different in terms of discussing these topics, integrating these songs, and working with these students. And the Social Justice Songbook I have shared with many young teachers who just need materials and needs sources. It's free or with a small donation, and it has a lot of potential. It's very diverse in the way that you can use it and amend things that you need to do. So when we're talking about the whole traditional training, I was one that things were very rigid in the way we presented things. I worked with Shirley McRae and Betty Berteau and all these things, and I love everything that they taught me. But we've all been on this journey to make things more real, making things more inclusive, being more respectful. And as I mentioned, the whole elementary middle school thing, as we work with this in elementary settings, which are very diverse, just like your collegiate and high school settings, I was once talking about, various holidays because we're, in a school where generally it's been Christmas and whatever. And I had a student who just burst out, "Oh yeah, I live next door to these Hanukkans." And while she continues to say Hanukkah like 5 times, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to cut this off, these are the unique challenges that we face with the little ones, who may or may not come from a background of knowing that there's anything beyond their town or anything beyond their street or their city or whatever. So we are all taking baby steps. A couple things that I want to just share our outline with you now, and then I'll be in and out of things. But clearly, I'm talking about the things for the set purpose for the session. Been guilty of doing many wrong things for all the right reasons. And talk a little bit about repertoire. Many of us are so guilty of doing a skim search of repertoire, but not really digging in. And even with the Social Justice Songbook, you really owe it to yourself and to your students to dig deeply, to find out as much background as you can about every aspect of the tune, the song, the culture, the message, the multiple messages. I taught, there's a wonderful arrangement out there, many of you know it, of Jim Along Josie that's great for elementary choruses. It's got meter changes. But when you dig deeply into the background of Jim Along Josie, you see that perhaps this is not the tune without a lot of explanation to choirs that you should be teaching, because there's a very dark side to the text of Jim Along Josie. And again, I taught it, I've performed it, I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just planting seeds here. Social justice songs in the elementary or middle school setting are not a unit. They're a way of thinking. They're inclusive throughout everything we do. And songs about enlarging the world for students and making connections. We see in the world how critical this is, particularly in our own country at the moment. And when I talk about units, years ago, I was teaching at a course in another state, well, it was in Texas, and was finding that one student was telling me, she said, well, you know, in March, I do my Kodai unit. And then in April, I do my ORF unit. So social justice songs, not a unit. Planting seeds is what this is about. Now, Social Justice Songbook. I want to talk just about 4 tunes. I'm going to share them with you. I know some of you have downloaded this. Some of you know this document and have probably used it. 2 of these are very familiar to most of you, I would assume, and 2 of them may not be. So a little bit about Social Justice Songbook before I share these. It offers a lot of choices to pick and choose and amend. And for those of you who work with elementary students or middle school even, you know that you sometimes have to turn on a dime because you know this is too much, this is too little, I need to add another part, I need to take a part away. So there's a lot of flexibility. In the Social Justice Songbook, for those of us who, you know, at times have settings that we can teach very traditionally, you can certainly do that. You absolutely can use all kinds of traditional teaching pedagogies with these pieces. There are so many opportunities to involve the students in discussions beyond the printed page, and also beyond just text, tune, rhythm, syllables, tonal syllables. And there are opportunities to extend for students to be involved in the planning of the performance in a culturally significant and appropriate way. So I'll come back to that, but right now I want to just share a couple of my favorites with you. I usually talk to myself when I screen share, and I'm trying not to do it because I'm old to be doing all this technology. Anyway, here's one that this was done at, I believe, the Southern Division ACDA conference by Tesla with a youth choir. And the wonderful thing about this is it does lend itself brilliantly to traditional teaching, if that's what you want to do. You can pitch it in any key. What I want you to do, I know you're all muted and I know you're all good sight readers, so let's just sing the tune, the top part, the melody, and then we'll talk a little bit about extensions with this. I had the right pitch here, hold on. Yeah, here we go. Wait a minute, here we go. Sorry, I'm just something. Okay, ready? We can start to sing together. Just the melody. Here we go. Do, re, mi. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in the world. And change will come to you. And then, of course, we go on multiple voices. Kids create voices. Great opportunity for solfege. We've got the do, then so, la, do, la, so, and so far down to low, mi for the third part, if you want to do part work. The other thing is this lends itself to all sorts of movement, drumming, body percussion, the possibilities are endless. And we'll talk a little bit more about that one later, but that's one I wanted to share. It's number 5 in there. Here again is one that is very familiar. And if you're teaching in a new situation, again, this is more for less experienced teachers than most of you, your kids may know this. And it's a great opportunity to tag to a familiar tune. And Becky will talk about this in a few minutes, as her teaching is in an urban setting at the moment, and she can share that. So it's all there for you. Most of you know it. We're not going to sing that. Just wanted to share that with you. Here's a nice arrangement that Tesfa did of We Shall Overcome. Again, familiar. Some kids will know it. Some kids will grab onto it. Again, unison, several parts, combinations with SATB groups in a very simple and meaningful way. I'm always looking when I'm working with, even doing festival work with young children, you have to be flexible. You don't always know what you're going to find when you go to work. So this gives you chances on the spot to amend, bail, change, add. The last one is one that we'll leave you with at the end of the session. This is a beautiful canon. I'm going to be doing it at the moment with Pittsburgh Youth Chorus for the spring. And it, again, offers so many possibilities for the needs of your particular group. So many teaching possibilities. You've got all sorts of ways of going through varying registers. You also have a very simple ostinati pattern that you can teach, and one group can sing while everybody else sings in canon. The chord progression, of course, lines up with the Pachelbel canon. So you could involve young instrumentalists as well with your group. Again, just planting seeds, your creativity can make this into something far more than that comes off the printed page. Those are just some toss-out suggestions. There are many more pieces there, but these are 4 that I want to recommend from my own personal experiences. So we'll pop back in with everybody. I see some chat. Am I missed? Because I really would like you to, oh, thanks, Thomas. If you have questions, you can always unmute and shout out. I'm used to working with little kids. You can also put them in the chat. And if I don't get it, someone unmute and say, hey, Shawn, you need to put that in the chat. Okay. Now, back we go. The next phase of our session is going to be Becky. And I just want to share a little bit about Becky. Becky teaches at Dilworth Elementary in Pittsburgh Public Schools. She has really helped me on this journey of making myself more diverse, making my thinking far broader. I am one who was trained, you have 3 minutes to get the rehearsal started, and then you go boom, 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 and you never shut up. I mean, the kids sing, but you run it that way. And one of the things that I just learned through the pandemic is how much the social time is so important to singers of any age. And I'm going to rethink. I will never teach a choral rehearsal the same way again, because when we went virtual at Pittsburgh Youth Chorus in March of last year, of course, we're Zooming and we're trying to figure this out, and none of us know what we're doing. But the kids were begging, saying, please, can we stay on longer? And it was not the singing so much that they were missing. They were missing the time as a choral unit. And all of you know this, but when you create art with someone else, you are forever bonded with them in a unique and different way. This is why we find so many kids at the high school, collegiate level coming out to their choral director, because they have, or sharing deeply personal things because they have an artistic comfort. We have made music together. We have made theater together. So I think that in the context of these songs, and Becky's going to get into context, we need to remember that. I've changed my whole structure now. I am on early. I stay late on the Zoom call, and kids just want to tell me and things they want to share with each other. And we sometimes forget about that. And that's such a way to include the social justice context when you have that kind of a rapport with your students. Okay, Becky, and by the way, Becky has links, which I'm going to put that all in the chat, to some of her sources. Becky, would you prefer the full screen like this, or do you want me to put the outline back up? What's good?
I'm easy. You can put the outline back up.
Okay, hold on. Let me just figure out how to do that. I'll find it. Go ahead and start, Becky, and I'll change it. Okay.
Hi, all. Yeah, my name is Becky. I teach at Pittsburgh Public Schools. It's an arts and humanities magnet. And we have 2 full-time music teachers. We have a lot of luxuries. Also, because it is a magnet school, there's a bit of cherry picking of population. We are, I would say the magnet process selects for very involved families. And so we have a lot of family support, and there's a really rich culture of family involvement. I'm a 27-year teacher, various diverse settings, but I've been in the city for 17 years now. Primarily elementary general music, also exploratory and performing choruses, and then I've done all city middle school chorus for the past dozen years or so. My role with Pittsburgh Public, or with PYC, has been a learning process for me. I think Shawn's been very gracious in describing my impact. I feel like I'm still floundering on trying to get more city kids in Pittsburgh Youth Chorus. We've tried a number of strategies, some stick, some don't. I think what we've realized and continue to realize is you really have to just constantly contact families and follow through and follow through and follow through and resend documents. And I'm still learning. We've had mixed success. I'm happy with where we are, but I'd like to talk to other people about how they're increasing sort of this shift to a city chorus rather than sort of a select chorus. Okay, so I'm talking about context. Context, the first link, this developing context definition by the letter A, is kind of a mess because everything is so segmented. The cultural here, social here, all these various, as if it's not just one context. So I almost see that more as a non-example than an example because of the lack of integration. So that being said, why is context important? Well, there are the obvious reasons. There's the respect for the origins, being respectful of the creators of the artwork. By giving children context, you build a relationship with them, and the music creates buy-in and they feel, but the biggest for me comes around culturally responsive arts education, which has been a big deal in Pittsburgh Public Schools. It should be a big deal everywhere. It's interesting, and a lot of other people have said it, we only talk about diversity when we're talking about, oh, well, I have Black children in my classroom, so now I have to be aware of their cultural norms or whereas really we should be culturally responsive for all of our differences, not just the ones that are, that are visible and obvious. Oh yeah, the relationship building piece. Culturally responsive art. We just watched a video with my school where the parents were, and the presentation was that culturally responsive for St. Patrick's Day was wearing green and making soda bread. And that wasn't a non-example of cultural responsiveness, that was the example. And there's a woman in Pittsburgh named Sister Aisha Thomas, and her definition of cultural responsibility is meeting at our humanity. It's not teaching multiplication facts through rap. That's not what cultural relevance is. It's I feel sadness, you feel sadness. And so in developing context, or joy or anger or whatever it may be. So for me in developing context, I am looking for the humanity and helping children see the humanity of these groups that they don't generally identify with. The C, letter C, so there's a problem with the world, or there can be a problem with the word world music. And Angela totally hit on it as it being othering, as it being, and the 2 articles that are there under C and D is sort of the origins of the term world music, that it had a very market-driven origin, that it was very separating, but from the beginning of this in the mid 80s of this, new genre, people who were engaged in it had problems with it. And people who were part of were already sort of rejecting it and pushing back against it. So that's a consideration in using the term world music. That particular article suggests eliminating categorizations at all. Music is music. It just happens to be from this place or these people or those people. But it's not a large category where it's all similar in some way. The term world music often is used for Black and brown people, to be very blunt. And again, can other kids who come from places where those are not common cultures for them. So perhaps not helpful. While this discussion's been going on since the mid 80s, letter D, there's an article there about how the Grammys have just renamed one of their categories. It's no longer world music, it's global music. Shades of difference, maybe some people might not find that any better, but this is an ongoing discussion. So I just kind of put it out there as a consideration as you're developing your own context, philosophy, and what you teach and why you teach it. Okay, so my process of context, first I have to come at it for me with considerations of accepting that I have bias. And my bias is not because I'm a white woman, but because I grew up in Meadville, Pennsylvania, with parents of this kind and this culture. And these were my experiences, not just looking at me on the surface, but the entirety of my life experience. I would say that I could try to come at things with accepting my own lack of authority. If I'm not teaching from my very narrow group of growing up in Meadville with two middle-class parents, then what is my authority? I don't have any. So I need to rely on then the primary sources. This has been kind of yes, absolutely. There's a huge discussion. I've been using the term ethnomusicology for a really long time. And then I'm starting to even think maybe that's problematic. And my kindergartners know what ethnomusicology, should they know what that is? So yeah, it's a heavy discussion, and I feel the responsibility weighing to try to be as authentic as I can be and keep their minds as open as possible and receptive to new literature and new ways of thinking without categorizing or putting in other tribes people who may be singing something in a language that's not familiar to them or with a different performance, culture or style. So here's the mea culpas. There have been a lot of mea culpas today, and I will admit to my own, which are many. One of them is, again, talking with authority. I realized that I was talking so much about Black history as if I were a primary source when I started to see some of the fifth grade girls look at me like, oh yeah, there she goes again, like she knows, and you could see it on their faces. And I'm like, and it was a real call out to me. I don't know. It's not my lived experience. So I have been trying to rely more on letting the primary sources speak for themselves and letting kids reflect on those sources. So one example would be, we do Sweet Home Chicago every couple of years when we're talking about the blues. We have a morning song, we have a morning meeting, we do a new song every 2 weeks. And in talking about that content, we talk about the Great Migration. It's in the 3rd grade social studies curriculum. How are you going to interact with that? And I found 7 letters from the Great Migration. Super useful. Because instead of me saying, here's some letters that people wrote in the South, and I'm going to read them to you, I hand those letters out to kids, and they can speak as somebody living in Louisiana, living near New Orleans, needing to move south or north to feed their families. And that culture they brought with them, the blues, came from a place and came from a desperation that they needed, that kids need to experience firsthand, that I don't need to sit back, because I think the farther you put yourself away from the primary source, it dilutes the impact of that source. So that's something. And again, what Angela said is the rabbit hole. Oh my gosh, the YouTube rabbit hole. How much there is to find and look and see, and looking at top 10s from various countries and from various album lists has been, or Facebook groups, or belonging to different organizations, or listening to young people. There's a song by a young woman named Coffee, and the song's called Toast. We ended up studying reggae and patois through that song, and that became one of our morning meeting songs. So yeah, I would say also, as Shawn discussed and many other people discussed, presenting your context of diverse timbres, accepting the belt, the Estel voice training. I don't know if anybody else has engaged in Estel voice training. Love Estel, because the twang is appropriate. If you're singing a twangy song and the belt blends, and a lot of us were taught the belt doesn't blend. Oh no, you can't belt. That's, you know, and that does vocal damage. A belt can blend and it doesn't necessarily do damage. And having names for that. We have the more traditional, you know, north-south embouchure sound we call the Make Your Mama Cry songs, because they're kind of, oh, they're making my mama cry. And then we have the belts are a complete, and so what song are we singing here, kids? Is this a Make Your Mama Cry? Or are we gonna wail? We're gonna wail, you know? And making that just as acceptable. And then examples of that in the classroom, of course. So the song I would choose from the songbook, personally, because I've used it before, is Hold On. Because it has such a rich context, going down the rabbit hole. You go to the gospel origins, you go to the Bible verses and their meaning. I have an awful lot of kids who sing in gospel choirs. But again, not me representing that as an authority, but letting those kids, their families, as they're interested and as they volunteer. And when we've talked about culture, now in a virtual world, I'm able to ask kids, go spend 5 minutes, we're gonna have a 5-minute bathroom break, go ask your families, what's your family culture? So now we've started to discuss, and a lot of them came back and all they had, not all they had, what they were given by their parents was a definition of religious culture or ethnic culture, rather than we have cinnamon buns on Christmas morning. That's part of your family culture. So I think expanding the definition, so it's not just ethnicity, race and ethnicity, and not just focusing on trauma in your teaching and the trauma that various groups, especially Black groups, have gone through. Pretty important to the discussion. So I have said a lot, and just kind of thoughts on developing your own context. I don't know if anybody else has considerations as you develop context. Where do you go? What do you look at? What are your sources? What do you value? As an elementary teacher, I'm used to just kind of shoving lyrics down their throat because we have 20 minutes every 6 days for rehearsals. So I don't have as much time for context as I like. We often do rural, urban, people, geography. Okay, now we're singing the song because that's the time I have and that's what I'm able to give. But I'd be interested in hearing what other people use for their context. If anybody has any, you know, comments, questions, statements around what do you value?
Yes.
And how do you develop that?
Becky, thank you for sharing that. Those are all very important considerations. And like I said, this is sort of a, you know, planting seeds kind of thing. But I want to just, before we sort of segue into the last segment, and I promised Karen I would finish at 12:58 or 12:59 so we can get the survey in and get you done on time. The whole concept, which follows Becky and Nessie, of literacy comes into play. And of course, Be the Change is a great example from the Social Justice Songbook to work on literacy. I wrote an article some years ago in PMEA that I thought was really realistic about really in the elementary general music, elementary choral track, how much literacy can we teach? And this goes back to our earlier presenter, you know, if you've had piano lessons like I did, if you were driven to music, you've got music literacy. If you didn't, you don't. And you probably, the kid could be just as talented, just as musical, have just as high music aptitude, but we just don't know it. So the music literacy piece is huge here. And this could catapult us into a little mini discussion. I have found that music literacy, you know, is limiting, and it's prejudicial in some ways, because We limit, kids. Oh, you don't read well, so okay, you're going over here. And I always felt I'm judged if I don't get these kids reading and I don't get them. I have not done my job. I'm not against music literacy. Okay, let's just preface that. I'm just trying to find balance. And back to my PMEA article, I wrote this article. I was very honest. And as my grandmother would have told me, no one likes a truth teller. I kind of got boiled in oil from a lot of people because they said, what? You don't think, you may not want to teach your kids to read, but we do. And so it at least brought up a topic for discussion. But I think when we're all thinking about inclusive practices, bringing more kids, sharing music from the globe, as Angie touched on, we need to think about that and balance it with where it falls in our setting. How much literacy can we do? How much is practical? How much is important? Which of our singers are going to go to music camps to study, privately and get all kinds? Of course, you have to be literate. We know that. But when we exclude kids from singing because they don't read, I have a problem with that. And of course, the Pittsburgh Youth Chorus, formerly Children's Festival Chorus, that I inherited, we're moving one step at a time, one brick at a time to expand our programs, to expand our literature, to just new uniforms coming out that are gender neutral. The Laura Ingalls Wilder dresses are gone. And we're still looking at all the pedagogy. Becky mentioned, honor the belt. And I agree. And we are now looking with kids like that and say, oh, you've got this wonderful belt. You've got some wonderful chest voice. Now we're going to expand the top. We're going to have you use the entire instrument. Historically, in our work there, if a student came and they were really belting, they would be referred elsewhere because they hadn't gone over the register lift. They didn't have this beautiful make mama cry sound, as Becky called it. Yes, I am a firm believer that to get kids to really sing well, young children, you've got to get them over the register lift. They have to make friends with the head voice. So I'm not a fan of, woo, my kids say, that's all we hear you doing in the basement, Dad, because I'm down there. Yeah, you've got to do it. But we also shouldn't disclude kids whose church traditions, whose cultural traditions have them using another part of their voice. It's our job to connect. And to connect those two voices or those two registers. So the Social Justice Songbook is one of those sources that can offer you a lot of diversity. I can't tell you how to teach every piece. That wouldn't, you have to know with whom you're working and how you can make that real to them. What I want to do as we conclude, first of all, I'm going to be sending all the stuff, so you will have these contacts. I'll put my email in the chat, and I appreciate any feedback, questions. Absolutely. If you're also interested in Ray Wise next October, he's coming, to do a residency with Pittsburgh Youth Chorus, and we're also combining with Pittsburgh Public Schools, several other choral organizations in Pittsburgh. So we would welcome any interest in that as well. Now, there are wonderful in the YouTube rabbit hole recordings of. Hold on here. I just need to click out of there. Wonderful recordings of social justice among pieces, but the love is love is love is love. There's particularly lovely recordings, and I found a colleague of mine in Florida did a virtual choir video with this love is love is love is love. And for those of us who have done virtual choir videos, we all know what that means. And so I'm going to share that with you for the last few moments. And I'll put some things in the chat while we're doing that. I just want you to hear and also appreciate the work that I'm sure they did to do this VCV. And hopefully this will inspire you. The text is beautiful, and I appreciate your time, and feel free to put questions in the chat. So we should be good to go here if this works. Hold on, I am needing to talk to myself now to do this. Okay, share computer sound. Are you able to see and hear this? Okay.
Love is love is love is love. Love is love is love is love. Oh, love is love is love is love. Oh, love is love is love is love. All we need is love, love, love. All we need is to be caritas et amor. Where there's love, love is love. Love is love is love is love. Love is love is love is love. Oh, love is love is love is love. Love is love is love is love. Oh, love is love is love is love. We need is love is love is love is love. We need is love is love.
And of course, I would love to go on, but I'm trying to be respectful of time. Checking the chat here. Would be happy to share virtual recordings. Kathleen, we have used primarily iMovie and used and then folded tracks that kids have recorded in on the iMovie. Lisa Avalixic, my executive director, is the tech guru who has helped us do that. But we are primarily using the iMovie to put the video with the audio. Okay, great question. I will fold, it's 12:59, Karen, I promise I'll stop talking, and I will now put some of the things from our session in the chat. And Karen, you can take over from there.
Sure. Thank you so much to Shawn and Rebecca for this awesome session. And I just downloaded the Songbook. I can't wait to use it. Thank you all of you for joining us today for this morning of learning. It's been really such a rich time together, and I appreciate your participation. You're taking time out of your schedules to join us. We look forward to offering more things like this in the future.